Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Good evening to those of you in Ireland. Just waiting for a few people to come in. My name is Miranda Driscoll. I'm the director of Solas Nua. We are based in Washington, DC, and we are a multidisciplinary arts organization that presents contemporary Irish arts to US audiences. So welcome to the fourth episode of Is It About a Bicycle? This is an online series that's been running for about a year now in association with the Global Irish Studies Programme at Georgetown University. And this particular event is also in association with wonderful Dublin Book Festival. So I know some of you are coming to us from there, and it wraps up tomorrow. So I think there's still a number of events that you can check out between now and then. So thanks to Julianne and the team at Dublin Book Festival, and also to Colleen Parsons at Global Irish Studies, and to Michaela Sridhar, who's looking after us today on Zoom. The event will be about an hour or so. We welcome your questions, so please feel free to pop them in the Q&A at any point, and we'll get to them either during or after the talk. So just a little bit about the series. Is It About a Bicycle? It's a series that brings together Irish and Ireland-based writers with artists in other disciplines, and also experts and leaders in other sectors, just to kind of talk about their shared interests. So any of you Flann O'Brien fans out there may recognize the quote from the novel The Third Policeman, which is a wonderful, wonderfully funny, meandering, absurd tale about time, death, and just the bizarreness of human existence. And so, a bit like the title, these conversations are invited and encouraged to sort of go anywhere or be about anything. And generally, the starting point is one piece of writing to get us kind of going. So I'm delighted today to welcome writer Kerry Ní Doherty, who will be in conversation with visual artist and environmental activist Katie Holton. And the starting point for their conversation is Kerry's very wonderfully beautiful Thin Places, which is a mixture of memoir, history, and nature writing, and it's really beautifully kind of woven together. It's a very moving and honest book, described as a celebration of the natural world and a memoir of one family's experiences during the Troubles. So if you haven't already managed to get yourself a copy, and if you're here in the US, it is coming out next spring with Milkweed. So we're going to pop in the Q&A at some point during the talk a link to that, so you can pre-order that. So just a little bit about both Kerry and Katie before we get started. Kerry Ní Doherty is the author of Thin Places, which was highly commended by the Wainwright Prize. She's written for The Guardian, the Irish Times, the BBC, Winter Papers, and others. She's currently finishing her second book. We might chat about that at some point, which we're hoping will be available in 2023. And Katie Holton is an artist and environmental activist based in New York City. Her work has been exhibited in museums internationally, and she represented Ireland at the 50th Venice Biennale. And at the root of her practice is a study of the inextricable relationship between humans and the natural world, as well as that of language. And Katie's well known for her tree alphabets. She did an Irish tree alphabet and a New York tree alphabet, which maybe will come up during the conversation. You can also see it at the Irish Art Centre in New York in a show that opens in their new building early next month. So I'm delighted to bring these two artists together for today's event. It's not the first time they've been in conversation. We're going to pop also in the Q&A a previously exchanged some thoughts for a piece on LitHub, and the heading of which was on planting seeds, excavating language, and the politics of place, which I think really beautifully sums up both of their practices. So on that note, I just very much like to thank and welcome Kerry and Katie. So thank you and enjoy the event.
Thanks, Miranda.
Thanks, Miranda.
And Kerry, it's so nice to be here with you. It's
and
our
to
first
be with you,
conversation.
It's so
It's
lovely.
it's funny because we both thought that Miranda had known about that conversation we had for LitHub, and that was maybe the reason she invited us to do this
Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah.
But then last
Yeah.
week we all discovered
Mhm.
she didn't know about it.
I know, right?
So we're here.
Life is funny.
And we get brought together again. I love it.
Oh,
But we're here to celebrate this beautiful, beautiful book,
yeah.
Thin Places. This copy I got at Books Upstairs in Dublin. Like Miranda said, it's coming out here. I'm in New York. It's coming out next year with Milkweed. And I should say I'm on the island of Manhattan, which is Mannahatta, the island of many hills. So it's a Lenape land, unceded Lenape territory. And I thought that maybe a land acknowledgement, you would appreciate that. But this book, have you seen this? Has this come across your bookshelves?
No.
Okay,
No,
well, before you come over on your
Beautiful.
tour, you're going to have to get a copy. And I just thought that
For
I know we're
sure.
here to celebrate your words and your writing, but I might just use Joy Harjo, the poet
Please.
laureate. And her introduction, she says, "We begin with the land. We emerge from the earth of our mother, and our bodies will be returned to earth. We are the land. We cannot own it, no matter any proclamation by paper state. We are literally the land, a planet. Our spirits inhabit this place." And then there's this, I had to include this other sentence: words are living beings. Poetry in all its forms, including songs, oratory, and ceremony, both secular and sacred, is a useful tool for the community. Though it is performative, there is no separation of audience and performer. And I thought it's, you know, I would have really loved to included a Lenape poem, but and I hope this doesn't feel like it's getting too far away from Thin Places, but I'm sure you'll see how this is all connected. The very first poem that she includes, and it's a really big book, you can see, and she goes around the four corners of America. So the very first one included is from 1907. The water birds will alight, and it's just one sentence. I'm not going to read the original because I can't pronounce it at all. But one of the translations is, "Surely upon the whole length of my form, the water birds will alight." And that's translated. There are a few translations, and they all happen to be by women. And I just thought,
gorgeous.
That it's going to nourish your soul, especially coming over on tour. With the Milkweed edition of Thin Places. And one thing that really struck me at the beginning was the curlews, which mean a lot to me in my heart.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering, to start our conversation, because I'm not sure, the audience is probably a mixture of Irish, American, who knows from where else. Do you want to talk about the title? Maybe some people don't know yet what a thin place is.
Sure, of course. So people might not know in a kind of an intellectual way what a thin place is, but I'm pretty sure that they will know in a bodily way or in an emotional way what a thin place is, because I do feel, and I explored a little in the book, that I feel like we've all kind of experienced places that are something other. So they're other than our day to day. They might make you feel a bit bigger than yourself or smaller than yourself, or you might feel a bit out of it or a bit more in it. You might feel more grounded, or you might feel more out of it. There are places where you can meet yourself in a bit more of a real way. So in kind of Celtic tradition, those places were often, like you would know, in kind of old church grounds, or maybe an old kind of oak forest or a stone circle or things like that. But since I've written the book, and even before that, I had kind of realized that places that make you feel a bit special don't need to be like that at all. They can also be the top of a housing estate, or they can be, like, I've had people message me who've said, "Oh, I've been on a roundabout in Berlin where I felt it was a thin place," or "I've been behind a shopping centre in Sheffield," and they felt that sense of, being out of themselves, or, you get shivers down you. People say they feel closer to God if you're religious, or so they're a big part of Celtic tradition. but they can be anywhere in the world, really.
And did you know from the beginning that that was the title of the book?
No,
It came later.
No, really interestingly, the title of the book was a really interesting process. And it kind of represents the journey that the book itself came on, because I'm always really open about the fact that it's not just my book, both the story that it tells and also the journey that the book came on. Like, they wouldn't have been possible without a whole plethora of other people. And so at the very, 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 very beginning of writing Thin Places, it wasn't called Thin Places, and it wasn't a memoir, and it wasn't a book. It started off as being...
I was just going to say, when was that beginning? Because I know you edited during the lockdown, so that was like the end point. But when did it all start?
So it all started a long time before I wrote it as a book. So I think the first seed of Thin Places was probably more than a decade ago, and it was a children's story. It started as a children's story, which I also watercolor painted. So it started off being called North, just a children's story about a little girl and a magpie. And then that kind of was the beginning of me trying to share my story. And then it sort of shape shifted a bit, and it became a poem called Mudlarking. And Mudlarking then grew into a series of political essays. And then it was only when I began thinking about writing it as a book that I realized that really what it was about was these places, but also the places in me that were quite thin as well. The kind of emotional thinness that we experience, where the veil between what we think we know and what we do know can be really kind of gossamer and can kind of dance. And so that was it, around the house's way.
I love that it started as a children's story, and since the book came out, you've had your own little seed.
Yes.
Little Angus.
I know, right?
So we're going to end the conversation on time. Because I remember I got in touch with you. I think maybe I had heard that, I had forgotten. With my tree alphabets, I had always thought they need to appear maybe in a form for children, especially the age Angus is out now. You probably know better than I do.
Completely.
But his eyes and how he sees the world, so really dramatic contrasts.
Completely. Yeah, I do think they would be great for children.
Yes,
for sure. Maybe we could do something together.
I think we've got to. It's inevitable. But I wonder, is this a good moment to read a little? Is Carrie frozen? Have I frozen? Have we all frozen? Oh, so I'm still here. I was going to ask Carrie to read. I could read some of Carrie's words until she becomes unfrozen. Sure. Oh, you're back.
You're back.
Am I
going to jump in and say, if you want to read something.
Can other people? I'm still here.
Okay, you're there. Great.
Yes, Carrie, I just asked if you'd like to read.
Hello.
I don't know.
I don't know what happened there. We've got full internet. I'm really maybe we've stepped into a thin place. I'm going to read. So thank you very much for asking me to read, Katie. I'm going to read a little bit from the very, very beginning, and it's kind of in your honor, Katie, the bit that I'm going to read. When I first see her, she is as still as a found stone in an ancient and hidden place. She stands out, a quiet caller of the eye. Her markings blend in so delicately in this place, against the grasses and the thistle, the sand that marks the Atlantic Ocean from the land. I am at Shrove Beach, completely alone, miles across the border from my home in Derry, when we cross one another's path. She looks so calm, unstirring in spite of the winds that now set the tall grasses on the beach to dance. She is so beautiful. I may even call her celestial, that I almost feel I have no right to be here, in this moment, in this place, with this grateful wonder. What part can I play in her story, the narrative of this ethereal offering of a creature? I begin to feel that I'm not, in fact, even seeing her. It's more an act of witness. There is so little action in the small part I play on this near winter morning at the edgeland of Donegal, in one of the most northerly places on the island of Ireland. I begin to dry myself. The water today was icy, and the sea's waves, tall and white as snow, like mountains she had given birth to overnight. I am shivering now on the wet November sand, but I feel like I've been made new somehow. There is almost full silence. All that undoes it are the soft sounds of the drawlin, a wren, and the water as it ebbs and flows out at the horizon. Then, all out of nowhere, a deep, melancholy cry rings out over the dunes. A call that speaks of wildness, of solitude, of survival and unimaginable beauty. 12 curlews are in flight in the sky above my head, calling out over the edges of the eastern coast of the Inishowen Peninsula. Their call is haunting, a siren song written long ago, and it drags me with it, out of myself and back in again, out and in like wing beat or ebbing breath. They have long held a place in our history as a marker, these folkloric birds, of the past, of the cruel and melancholy passing of time with all its changes. The curlew's cry has shape-shifted into mournful lament, an elegy for all that is lost.
That is so beautiful. I love it. I had put a marker here, especially in case you hadn't mentioned the curlews. I wanted to ask. Now you're in Longford, like in the bogs in the Midlands, which is where I think you know this. This is where I grew up. I was in the Midlands in Longford until I was 10 when we moved to RD. And now I'm a friend of RD Bog, and I'm campaigning to try and help save our precious peatland on the East Coast. But those bogs in the Midlands are, I guess, part of my my heart. And now you're there.
Yes, I'm in Westmeath, so I'm the border county.
And do you have curlews?
Well, I have.
Are there any curlews there?
Curlews. Yes. Can you hear me? Okay. Are you able to hear me? Yeah, I have seen I have seen curlews in Westmeath only once or twice, so I would definitely have expected to see a lot more, especially because my house is directly behind the bog, so we're literally the closest dwelling. So yeah, I would have expected to see a lot more, but actually I had read Curlew Moon by Mary Caldwell, and I understood already that the situation is we're in a sort of a very difficult situation in Ireland with our curlews.
Yeah, it's dire.
So that's why,
they only had 34 confirmed breeding pairs in the 2021 report.
Yeah, it's really,
it's one of the reasons the Friends of RD Bog came together was learning this, and we've all we live there, so we hear the curlews. I was sitting outside with my mum in the summer, and the summers when you know that they're breeding, and now it's winter time, so the flocks that we have are the migrating ones that are coming to Ireland because it's much warmer for the winter. But I think this place and sharing the land with creatures, I think this is something that we both feel deep inside of us, that we are humans and we communicate and we use words and language, but these other non-humans are also sharing the same land and the same places, whether they're thin or not. The fat places too. But how do we come
how do
together
we
and
try?
communicate.
Yeah, I know. It's that kind of age-old question, Terry Tempest Williams, how do we put our love into action? And I suppose that's where many of us are at. I mean, I recently was in conversation with an incredible writer called Cal Flynn, a Scottish writer who I don't know if you've read Islands of Abandonment, but everyone should.
We were both at McDowell together. We overlapped for like 24 hours.
She's
so
incredible. I
have
really,
her book up here.
I love her. And we talked kind of at length at our event about how how important it is to, and Cal looks at this in her book, at how we need to reimagine what beauty means in order to sort of try and live in a way that makes room for all of us, and that doesn't have the human at the top the way it has been for so long. And I think it's a really tough, the timing is really incredible with what we've been going through and what we've been hearing of that's been happening in Glasgow. And I suppose we're all of, not, I won't say all of us, but many of us that are in the creative world are trying to find ways to, I don't know, maybe undo is not the right word, undo the mess that we've made. We can't undo it. And I suppose it's about trying to make a way through.
I just picked up this,
I guess,
yesterday. So
yeah,
it makes me think, when you said we need to undo, this is just like trying to come up with a new history. So The Dawn of Everything, David Graeber, David Wengrove.
totally.
And I think a lot of us know instinctually, right, that our stories and our histories are wrong. We somehow forgot. That's why Joy's book is so important, because listening to the Indigenous stories and voices are what we need to do. And through history, they've always been forgotten. Like on the island of Ireland, we were told we couldn't use the Irish language, and hedge schools emerged. And the Irish language is something that neither of us have it.
Yes,
but you're learning.
I'm learning, I'm learning. And I think I think that there's something really drastic inside us that's kind of tries to get out, because even not just with the Irish language, but I was messaging with a friend last night who is Welsh but who grew up in England, and she's considering bringing her sons up there in Wales, but she says already even thinking about going back there without having the language makes her feel really insecure. And so I suppose there's this sense of identity that language is such a basic thing, but in a way, but it's so political, and it's also very politicized, and especially maybe particularly languages where there has been a deep-rooted political background. I'm always aware of the fact that when I'm trying to see myself in place, I'm always thinking about who came before and if we hear their story and if we don't. And in Ireland, there's, like in many places, there are just so many unspoken words that are beginning to come to the surface now. And we have to be ready to hear. We have to be ready not just to hear them, but to listen, because there is a difference between hearing and listening. One is needed before the other, and in a way, in order to really hear and to really listen, we actually have to allow space for everyone at the table.
It's making me think of a different
conversation.
Well, coming back to the bog and the bog bodies and things that have been buried underneath the surface for a very long time, for tens of thousands of years. And I guess I just have to say, I'm not going to get it out of my head, the fact that I know that you're there right now in the Midlands, and you're actually moving, right? In a few weeks, you're going to Cornwall, and that's, anyone who has read your book knows how it's such a story of place. It's such an honest, Miranda, I think, used that word too. It's so raw and beautiful, and but it really is a journey through places and time.
Totally.
And I wonder if you new at the, and like you said, it was a long story, like maybe 10 years or so that it came, you spent writing it. Was it ever scary? Did you always know you wanted to share so much with the reader, with people you didn't know?
I didn't want to share that much at all, actually. And I think, and I've spoken recently about this a lot, it was definitely the editing process that brought the story out. So and I think this happens with a lot of memoir, maybe particularly female memoir. There's a lot that we feel that we don't have a right to say, or there's a lot that we feel scared of voicing. There's a lot that we think, well, like other people have been through worse, or, you know, who cares kind of thing. So there was a lot that I, in it, probably in the first 6 renditions of the book, because the book went through lots of different edits that were all standalone books, really. They weren't really linked with each other, oddly. They, in moving through
sorry, I just see somebody says, sorry, I'm just seeing a message to maybe raise your voice a tad. Thank you.
Okay.
So maybe,
me.
I don't know who that's.
Okay, sorry. So
even though Angus is sleeping next door.
Oh, no, he can't hear me. It's fine. Is that a little bit better for the person who, I hope, if not, just let me know. But yeah, it went through all of these different renditions, and it really took both my agent and my editor really drawing a lot more of the trauma and the rawness out, because I didn't feel for a very long time like I had any right to voice that story at all.
It immediately makes me think of this book that Kate Norbury edited, Women on Nature, where she brought together 100 women and female identifying people on the islands of Ireland and Britain, the archipelago, if that's how you pronounce that word. And it includes from the end
that word.
The end of Thin Places included. She also kindly included the Irish Tree alphabet, which was an honor for me to be included with writers, because I feel like I'm a failed writer. But I think what you were saying about women and not feeling you have the right maybe to share your stories. There's so many layers, like that's a whole other conversation that you've probably had and will have in the future. But just for people out there, this was a book that I got from Point Reyes Books over in California. So it's available in America for the audience here. And books upstairs.
It's such a good book.
Beautiful.
Right? Yeah. I'm really honored to be in it.
And I think Kate herself, when she had the idea, maybe she didn't realize it was going to be such an enormous undertaking. And it took years longer than she thought. So I feel like there are so many. We have so many little lanes that we could go down.
I know, right?
But it does occur to me that when we had our little chat, was that last week or a few days ago, I lost sense of time, that you did mention it would be okay to ask you about the work that you're working on now, which is really exciting. And I would love to hear what you're happy to share.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm at work on my second book, and it's going to be a very different book from Thin Places. It does pick up where Thin Places left off, and it kind of, I'd started writing it just before the pandemic began, and so it's obviously changed form and shape a little bit because of that, but it's just looking at the first year of living here in Westmeath, and it looks at how that what home means, and and I guess that sounds like it's not a lot, but it actually is a lot, just for
you could be starting a PhD.
For some people, the concept of home is quite a lot, and it's kind of an odder format. It's a bit more hybrid, which is what I originally wanted for Thin Places, but actually I'm really glad that my editor pulled it into shape and kind of got it to pull its socks up, because it was a very hybrid, meandering book that I guess would have left the reader maybe feeling a bit on the outside, which is not nice or good. And so, but this current book will, yeah, I think will maybe reflect a little bit more who I am and what this place is and what it's meant to me living here, and how much it changed me to live here. Yeah, I'm excited. I'm really excited about it. I always felt like once I'd got thin places out of my system, I could then begin the real work in a way, which feels like a silly thing to say, but actually it really does make sense for me that I had so much I wanted to write about, but I almost didn't feel I could until I'd sort of got this book out of the way, and that people might understand me a bit more.
Mm-hmm.
And then I could move on somehow.
I wonder who's more excited, you or me, the other readers of Thin Places. I can't wait for this new book. And I also, I feel like inevitably you'll have to, the pandemic and COVID, and that the fact that we all had to cocoon, even though, in Ireland, that was something for like people like my mum in a certain age category were officially cocooning. I think our whole species in a way had to confront this for a small amount of time. We've now quickly, like here in New York, we've quickly moved on, everything, back to normal, which got us into this mess in the first place, is very busy happening outside. But is that something that that you were wary of, or maybe not wary, but it would have been conscious of the fact that I'm sure you didn't want to write a book that's about the pandemic, but it's a part of the story.
No, the really interesting thing was that when I wrote the synopsis of the book, so I started it on the leap day because we had an extra day in the first year of the pandemic. It was a leap year, and I'm kind of into things like that, and I'm into patterns and meaning and signs, and I knew that that's when I wanted to start properly on the next book. And so I was heavily editing Thin Places at that stage, and it felt right to be moving into the next part. So the book synopsis was written sort of the end of February and the first week of March. And we locked down in Ireland a lot earlier than the United Kingdom did. And so, the synopsis suddenly seemed like it might, the synopsis talked about what solitude meant and what it meant to move somewhere very isolated and what it meant to be walking the same two fields, and this was way like, obviously this then became everyone's experience. So I did worry a bit at the beginning, like, how can I even dream of writing what I'd planned on writing, and then I kind of just realized that's that life happens in that way, that my partner always says we make plans and God laughs. It's a really old kind of Irish saying. And you don't even need to be religious. He's not religious. It's just that idea of we're not in charge all the time. And so I realized that I did still need to write that book, because actually, we were isolated anyway, like really isolated, and we had chosen it before the pandemic chose to isolate us all. And so it felt important to kind of show that, I guess, the interweaving of the fact that, yes, I had chosen to move somewhere where I would have to encounter myself in a way I hadn't before, because I'd always been so busy. And I suppose there was something, I had to give in to that. I had to give in to the idea that it wasn't going to be the story that I necessarily thought it was going to be, but that is how stories work, and that is how lives work. And I suppose, I knew I wanted it to be a journal. So I wanted it to map a year.
Does it take that form?
It takes that form, and I kind
wonderful.
of, and it the way that I journaled and why I journaled changed so vastly in that first year of living here. And when I wrote the first synopsis, obviously I didn't know that I'd be able to be to fall pregnant and all of the
Right.
and all of that. So
It's like it was all meant
but
to
that's
be
okay.
in a way. And
Yeah,
I
I mean,
think this
it's
notion of time and the journaling is something
yeah, it's
is so heavy with all of us
totally.
trying to deal with
I
our own.
know, totally. And that's why I was so anxious, because so the book is about solitude and how time acts in weird ways. And I mean, then that began happening for everyone. And it was like, oh, and how can I write that book now whenever everyone has experienced that? But actually, our differences and our similarities are what make us connect. And I suppose, yeah, I would want to read people's experience. So I suppose there might be some people that want to read mine. We'll see.
I just think that our species, we've come to this point where COVID really, it was right there. We couldn't avoid it. We had to stop everything. We had to think about the deep time, the geologic time of, the coronavirus didn't erupt out of nowhere. It's because we've been eating, our species has been eating up land that we should leave alone. And so viruses are hopping and moving into our communities, and our communities are gobbling up non-human communities. But thinking on the long time frame, I think is maybe when you zoom in. So scaling is so fascinating. So when you zoom in on a small time frame like a day, you can I guess, well, okay, you've got Ulysses, right? Where Joyce did this already, just 24 hours, and you can talk about the whole history of everything.
Totally. And I mean,
but I think it's something that's very difficult, right, for our human brains to think on geologic timescales. And I think completely is doing that with the moths and the non-human.
Totally. And the closer that we observe, the more we realize that we're just as small in a way. And I do think that the concept of zoning in or coming right out is a really important one when it comes to other than human species.
And
I think how we approach things is really
I just wanted to ask, just in case you did have words or writing that you wanted to share. Obviously it's all in progress, so maybe not, but just in case you do.
And maybe not. I think
that's normal, right?
I have this weird thing where I it's kind of like, where you're having a secret love affair and you're scared that if you tell anyone it's gonna
I was surprised that you even said you'd be happy to talk about the next book, because I feel it's almost like concrete. If you say it out loud, then it's like, oh no,
totally.
Now I can't actually make it.
I think I have to talk about it to make it happen. But I think that untangle it, and but I think that to take one strand out might kind of wreck the chaos. But maybe we can talk another time and I can share from it.
I see Francie has put in a comment. Life is what happens to you while you are busy making other plans. That's a John Lennon quote.
Totally. So many people have said that to me recently, and I'm grateful. I'm grateful for that reminder, just to be really present in the moment, because I am reminded I am having to I've been forced into living that way anyway, because I've just become a mother, and caring for anyone, being someone's carer, that does require you to really properly be in the moment. You really do have to be with what you're doing, whether it's feeding someone or whether it's ensuring that they get the sleep that they need, or that they get the fresh air that they need, or the light that they need.
Does it take the planting seeds to a whole other level, or is it just very another?
it does. I think being a carer, I mean, it's unlike anything I've ever experienced before, because it's a very it's yes, it's a very nourishing and very nurturing thing, but it's also can be, and I mean, I'm okay to talk about this, but it also can be quite overwhelming, and it can be quite scary. I think particularly because of the pandemic. And I think that there's a lot more pressure has been placed, maybe in particular on mothers, than on any, well, I don't know. I can't say that actually. Maybe all carers of all types have had increased pressure.
This might be sort of related. It's another question. What female memoirs inspired you just to keep the mother reign?
Oh, so many, so many. I really love Doireann Ní Ghríofa's books. I love Sinead Gleeson, Emily Pine, Sarah Baum.
All Irish.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I do love you know, on the radio when they're not meant to say what brand to use, other nationalities are available, but no, I think, but I am, you know, that's that, and I mean, I do, and I love, you know, I love, for example, When Women Were Birds. If we're kind of speaking a bit to the American audience, you know, I love all of those greats as well. But I do think that it's important for us to talk about the works that really properly invite us in. And I think for me, I felt really invited in to talk about my life through seeing, and I mean, not just reading those, but also how supportive those women are of all of the other women that have come after them. It's really important that we say that, because I think that there's, like with anything, obviously books are they're a currency, and sometimes we see it within the publishing industry within any creative industry, where people are kind of they're really hidden into themselves, and they don't share opportunities, and they don't share advice, and that's not the case in Ireland. It's not the case. The support and the solidarity and the just love that's shared amongst Irish female creative nonfiction writers, and actually fiction as well, you know, the like of Jan Carson, Wendy Erskine.
It feels like a community.
It really is, and it's so important to me.
It's like a forest, right? You wouldn't have one tree. You're all nourishing each other.
Are all connected, and that's a really good analogy, and I love that analogy. And because we're all so different from one another, but there is a depth there, and there's a lot of support, and I think that I'm really grateful for it. And I'm, you know, it's really important that we acknowledge those voices that encouraged us.
And also the indie publishers. There's been explosion, you know, before COVID. Maybe the last 5-10 years of publishers, journals, magazines, because you can't write in a vacuum. You need to have these places where the words can be shared, and which also makes me think of Twitter and social media, which I hate. Maybe we all hate it, but it's a necessary evil in a way. And that's how I first came across your work, because it was through, because we were all in lockdown, I think, and I was noticing how your tweets were like these visual poems. You'd have photos and words, and it felt to me almost like like you were making little mini movies or something in a Twitter form, and very beautiful. And I just wonder, had you ever maybe the next book is not going to take this format, but have you ever thought about sharing the visuals alongside, or do you keep them very separate?
I would love to. I mean, it's like I love image. You know, I like you were saying, you feel like, did you say you felt like you were a field writer? I feel like I'm a field artist. I consistently feel it, like I mean,
So let's get
started
together and make a band. We can
yeah,
fail
totally
musicians.
right. Totally. And you know, it's like I've always been drawn to the world of art. Even though and I suppose I guess that they're very linked for me. Like when I was writing Thin Places, I had folders that had all the images for each chapter that I returned to again and again, a bit like Pinterest. And I
don't understand.
You know, and I do think they fuel me, and I think that that's why I love Instagram so much, because there is a coexistence there between the words and the image that you maybe don't get so much on Twitter unless you force it in, and it's maybe stands out a bit more if you do it that way.
That's maybe why it jumped out at me on Twitter, because I tend to follow a lot of journalists and scientists to get for me it's a news feed.
So totally, that makes sense.
Striking.
So I would absolutely love to.
You're not worried about the fact that it's out there and it can be taken, and that these big mega huge the companies are so big that they own all our material. We're giving them free images, free words.
I have a really funny relationship with the internet, and I kind of dip in and out of how I feel about it, like underwater and up and underwater and up. It's a very odd experience because it's a place, right? It is a place.
Not a thin place.
Maybe it is thin, actually. Maybe it is quite thin. I mean, I've actually, if we're calling out excellent books, Amy Liptrott's next book, The Instant, out with Canongate in the UK, really soon, like spring 2022. I'm not entirely sure of the details for other places, but it will be in America. Completely excellent, beautiful, incredible, as you would expect, but it looks at the internet and blew my mind.
And she wrote it after she stopped.
Yeah, I'm funny about what.
Sorry,
so I mean, I guess I'm funny about what goes up now, but I also do see it as a tool for me. I do see it as part of my work in a way. It's funny.
I think you use it in a really a beautiful way, which I appreciate a lot. I wonder with the grounding, am I allowed to ask, is there a title for the next?
There is, but I'm not going to share it yet. Okay. I know that's really cheeky.
You're allowed to do that.
Yeah, I feel like you might like it, Katie. I hope you will. I hope you will. I initially wanted, weirdly, I wanted to call it Grounding, and then thankfully I didn't, because there's another really beautiful book coming out soon by Lola Elender called Grounding. And I guess what you were saying is sometimes these things happen in a funny way. I wrote a piece for Winter Papers, and then it kind of was the beginning of the next book, and so it sort of shape-shifted a bit, but it does look at the concept of grounding and what it means to be earthed. Or
it's funny, that you just mentioned a title that you were thinking of, because I just started reading this, and which is The Dawn of Everything, a new history of humanity, no less. And I'm just mentioning it again just because you did say somewhere that we need to maybe change or upend or rethink our whole history of everything. I feel this really strongly. And the chapter titles are so beautiful in this, but it's so accessible. You would think this could be impossible. Wicked Liberty is one chapter title. The Ecology of Freedom.
Brilliant.
Then there's one, Imaginary Cities. And I was like, Imaginary Cities? That's that book that's up here by Darren Anderson. Who I don't know personally, but you do.
He's a really wonderful writer, wonderful man, like really proud to come from the same city as him. He's been super supportive of my work as well, and just really encouraging. And yeah, he's definitely someone that everybody should read. All of his things. Inventory is the most recent book, and it's a memoir about coming from Derry, but it's done by objects. Incredible, like very, very incredible.
The only reason I mentioned it is it a coincidence? I wonder. I'm so curious to read the chapter and see, do they acknowledge him, or did they come to it from, separate without knowing his work?
I mean,
and I think because there are times, right, in human history where we are thinking, and it's like the lone genius who comes up with the idea for vaccines or penicillin. It's not. That's not how it works in reality.
No, it's not.
We're all thinking.
No. We're evolving.
These things.
Yeah, we're evolving.
Yeah, and there's something in the air at the same time. I
agree. I think it works that way.
I've just noticed that the chat actually has some of the links, because we thought they would all be popped in the Q&A, but if anyone's looking for the links to some of the things that we mentioned, lots of books, because that was one question I was going to say, would you share books that you're reading now, but maybe you by listing some of your favorite.
Yeah, totally. I mean, as I said, I've just read Amy Liptrott's book 3 times in a row, which
wow.
is really, I'm a bit like that. Yeah, maybe it's just I get a different feel for a book each time, and it's, in fairness, it's very slim. So I was able to do that. But yeah, I mean, I loved it, and as I said, I'm really enjoying Lula Lender's book, which is out in spring of next year. I thoroughly can recommend The Cure for Sleep, which is Tanya Shadrick, and it's out with W&N here in the UK. I'm not entirely sure about America, but I'm pretty sure if you contact her on Twitter, she can tell you. That's Tanya Shadrick. And it looks at what it means to really be a woman in the world, and what it means to live an awakened life. Yeah, it's great.
Sounds kind of like your book, which is coming out with Milkweed in the spring, and you're going to come over, sadly not in the spring, but later next autumn.
Yeah, I think it's going to be in the fall. Yeah, so hopefully COVID will be a bit I don't really know what the language is. I don't know what to say anymore, but yeah, hopefully that tour will go ahead. We're really hoping that I can come and talk about the book and meet lovely people, because that's what it's about for me, really. It's about meeting readers and talking to lovely people like you, Katie. And
well, I think having a book like this over here is so important. I can't wait for the conversations that you have with America. Like, I'm here, but I'm obviously totally Irish.
Yeah,
so to see what the reaction is.
Yeah.
You can't take the boggle out of me.
No. And I know people are always looking for other things to read, so I would like to give a bit of a shout out to the book that I've most recently had some work in, which is called The New Frontier. It's a collection of border writing, so writing about the Irish border, and it was to acknowledge and mark 100 years of the border on the island of Ireland. And that was edited by the incredible James Patterson with New Island Review, who are wonderful press here in Ireland, and I would thoroughly recommend that book. Some incredible work, The New Frontier, and it's some incredible work in it. Maybe in particular the female writers, but that's maybe always the way. Yeah.
You said it, not me.
Yeah, I would thoroughly recommend it.
Right.
Yeah.
I can see that we're getting close on the time, and I know baby Angus needs you. We can't keep you too much longer. So was there anything that I forgot to ask that you'd love to share? One parting message?
I wanted to say to Miranda and to you both, thank you very much. Go Rami and Agat. Thanks a million for having me on and for supporting the work. And I just also wanted to say, Katie, just how much your work has really impacted on me and strengthened and nourished me.
Same.
And how that we do need each other and we turn to each other in times of darkness, and how that's a really good analogy for what we need moving forward into the winter and into the darkness that the next stage of our time holds. And I think the togetherness will get us through.
And at the end of your book, you mentioned how, you know, the dark is beginnings are found in the dark, I think is what you said. So the winter it's not a negative time, even though it can feel bleak.
And even
it's actually the time when the
winter
seeds,
that humanity.
The seeds are underground.
The winter that humanity's kind of going through.
Mm.
Yeah.
So much potential. We have to focus on the positives, even though we're in the middle of the 6th mass extinction and everything is, you know, with COP26 ending, it feels like we're literally at the end of humanity. But we have to fight.
No, we have to be We have to be hopeful.
We'll have the courage, I think, to be hopeful.
Thank you so much, both of you. I can't believe that was an hour. That just flew. And just to say, like, you know, you know, I'm conscious, I suppose, that some of the people listening are here in the US and haven't had a chance to read it, but I think it comes across that we all highly recommend that you do. And hopefully we were talking, you know, on your tour, Kerry, that we'll get you to DC somehow, which would be wonderful, so people can read the book in advance. And thanks so much to both of you for sharing those. I was frantically trying to but it's always really nice, you know, especially to hear from a writer where their sort of inspiration comes from or what they're reading. And Katie as well, in terms of the work that you're doing and the crossover between both of you. I think it's brilliant. And like you said at the start, funny that I didn't know that you had already had but it totally would fit, I think.
And I don't know if American readers or listeners would have heard of something that I've been really influenced by. So just on a quick parting note, if that's okay, the Nan Shepherd Prize is something that might really interest a lot of people. It's run in connection with Canongate, but it's run by two really strong, incredible people who just want to get a plethora of new voices into the world about just doing right by how we live just now. And they just put their long list for this year up on their website yesterday, with a little summary of each writer. And amazing. Oh my goodness, people are in for such a serious treat. Because Nina Minga Powell's book that grew out of she was the winner of the first Nan Shepherd Prize, and Bodies of Water will be in America as well. I'm not entirely sure when, but people should buy it anyway. I know, like, you can buy it through Caught by the Rivers website and they ship to America.
Okay.
That's an easy way in, but definitely check out the Nan Shepherd Prize.
Amazing, and such an amazing
it
was such an amazing so name as well.
I know, right? And it's in memory of the incredible Nan Shepherd, but obviously a little nod to the fact that these voices that we need to hear they're everywhere, you know.
And I think what's like, it's funny that you mentioned Nan Shepherd, because I think I came across Nan Shepherd first from reading Robert Macfarlane, and I know he's a friend of yours, and you mentioned him in your book. And I think that's amazing. Like, I just think in creative nonfiction as well, I find myself putting down the book and reading to look up the book that they've referenced a lot of the time. So this kind of creates this sort of amazing web. But but yeah, we will definitely check that out. And yeah, thank you so much.
Great.
I hope you've enjoyed it. And I know it's Sunday evening there, so you should get back to your
been gorgeous
your stuff.
Thank you so much,
Katie. Thanks again to you. Just to mention that the show that Katie's in New York is also coming to DC next July, which is a group show of contemporary Irish visual artists, which we're bringing to DC with Solas Nua. So hopefully we'll see both of you in that part of the world very soon.
Definitely. Yeah.
Thanks for your time.
Thank
Thanks so
you,
much.
Thank you so much. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you, Kerry.
Thank you so much. Bye.